Everyone laughed at the poor single father because he inherited only an old cabin in the woods. But when he opened the trapdoor in the floor, the whole family realized what a huge mistake they had made. Subscribe to the channel and comment which country you're watching from. Adam Hayes had once believed that life, even in its harshest moments, always left room for hope. But after everything he had endured in recent years, that belief had started to crumble like the worn bricks of the apartment building he and his son called home. The days felt heavier with every sunrise, each morning a reminder that he was alone in this battle. The headlights from the passing traffic would flicker across the peeling wallpaper at dawn, as if trying to shake him awake from the exhaustion glued to his bones. His son Liam, despite his fragile body and frequent doctor visits, seemed to carry more strength in his small frame than Adam could muster as a grown man. They were each other's whole world, the last remaining evidence that love could survive heartbreak. The memory of his wife still hurt like a wound that refused to close. She had been the gentle force that balanced his life, the voice that whispered that everything would get better eventually. But illness had stolen her away too young, leaving Adam choking on grief he was never given the luxury to process. He had to stay strong for Liam, who was barely old enough to understand loss. From that moment forward, every step Adam took was devoted to his son's survival. He worked wherever they would hire him, stacking shelves overnight in a supermarket, delivering packages in the early morning chill, and occasionally repairing old furniture for neighbors who offered more pity than cash. Sleep was a privilege, and fear was a constant companion. Liam's health always seemed to teeter on the edge of something irreversible. His condition required expensive treatments, frequent medication, and regular checkups that drained what little money Adam managed to scrape together. There were days when Adam had to choose which bills to pay and which to ignore until the final notices arrived. The feeling of failure haunted him every time he looked into his son's tired yet trusting eyes. Liam never complained, never cried about the pain or the needles or the exhaustion. He simply held his father's hand and believed in him, even when Adam struggled to believe in himself. The only person who understood and supported him through this impossible reality had been his grandfather, Samuel Hayes. Samuel was a man of few words but immeasurable wisdom. While the rest of the family lived like hungry predators waiting for his fortune to fall into their hands, Samuel spent his final years investing his care and affection into Adam, and especially into little Liam. The old man would visit every month, slipping a small envelope of cash into Adam's worn jacket pocket with an expression that said he wished he could do more. He would take Liam to the park, tell him stories about the mountains where he grew up, love that boy as if time wasn't running out. Samuel had been the only person who treated Adam not as a failure, but as a man doing his best under the cruel weight of life. And then, one cold morning, Samuel was gone. The world seemed quieter without him, emptier in ways Adam wasn't prepared for. The funeral attracted relatives Adam had not seen in years. They arrived in expensive cars wearing expressions that resembled grief but lacked its depth. He watched them with bitter realization. Their sudden concern wasn't for the man who had died, but for the treasures he might have left behind. Adam kept Liam close as polite conversations buzzed around them, every sentence weighed down by anticipation of property and wealth rather than memory or sorrow. When the day came to read the will, tension filled the room like static before a storm. The attorney, a stern man with silver-rimmed glasses and a practiced neutrality in his tone, began listing the shared inheritance. Samuel's house in the city went to his sister, a woman who wiped her eyes as though she had lost her only lifeline, despite barely visiting the old man in his final years. Each of Samuel's children received an enormous sum of money that made their eyelids twitch with greed. The air grew thick with envy and self-satisfaction. Adam kept waiting, knowing in his heart that Samuel would not forget him. When the lawyer finally pronounced his name, the words struck Adam like a silent blow. Adam Hayes inherits the cabin in the mountains. A pause followed, the kind that seemed to stretch into eternity, then laughter. Not loud or aggressive, but sharp, sneering giggles disguised as amusement. They exchanged looks that said how fitting it was that the broken widower, the burden to the family, received the most worthless piece of property. A small, weathered cabin deep in the woods, a place no one cared about and everyone secretly despised. The relatives whispered as though Adam could not hear them. Of course, Samuel would leave his failure of a grandson the useless shack. Of course, the man who never had anything would once again be handed nothing. Adam bowed his head, not because he felt defeated, but because he knew none of them deserved the satisfaction of seeing pain cross his face. Deep inside, he felt a faint spark of confusion rather than humiliation. Samuel had loved him. Samuel had supported him. Samuel would never mock him, even in death. That thought lingered quietly like a faint light in his chest. When everything was concluded, the family walked away with smug smiles and plans to spend their newly acquired wealth on lavish vacations and unnecessary luxuries. Adam left with only a set of old keys and the weight of their judgment on his shoulders. He returned home that evening, exhausted, both physically and emotionally, as Liam slept curled up on the apartment couch. Adam sat beside him, brushing a gentle hand through his son's hair. The room felt colder than usual. He wondered for a moment if Samuel had made a mistake. But no, the old man had been sharp until the end. There was a reason he had chosen the cabin. There had to be. He thought about the woods, the fresh air that might help Liam breathe easier, the distance it would put between them and the cruel world that refused to make space for them. Maybe a new beginning was hidden behind those aging wooden walls. Maybe Samuel had intended to give them a home, not a burden. As the night stretched on, Adam made a decision. He would not sit and drown in pity like the rest of the family expected. He would take Liam and drive into the mountains, to that little cabin where Samuel had spent so much of his own life. If there was even the slightest chance of giving his son a better tomorrow, Adam would take it. He packed their few belongings into cardboard boxes and suitcases that had seen too many bus terminals. He sold old furniture that no longer served a purpose, canceled the lease on their apartment, and prepared for the journey. The exhaustion that once chained him now gave way to determination. This was more than just moving homes. It was a step into the unknown with only love and trust to guide them. On the morning they left, Adam lifted Liam into the passenger seat of their rattling car, and something flickered in the boy's tired eyes. A glimmer of excitement, a fragile but beautiful hope. As the city disappeared behind them and the road wound upward into the mountains, Adam found himself gripping the steering wheel with a strange mixture of fear and optimism. Trees grew thicker, the air cooler and cleaner. The sky seemed wider, the world quieter. It felt as though they were leaving behind a life that had never wanted them and driving toward a future that, just maybe, could finally offer them a place where they belonged. He looked at Liam and saw the faintest smile forming on his lips. That alone was enough to convince Adam that he had made the right choice. He did not know what awaited him at the end of that road. He did not know if the cabin would be livable or if it would crumble the moment they touched it. He had no idea why Samuel had chosen him to inherit it. But deep down, beneath all the exhaustion and scars, Adam carried one undeniable truth. His grandfather had always believed in him. And if Samuel had believed he could find something of value in that cabin, then Adam would not doubt him for a single heartbeat. He pressed his foot on the gas, feeling the climb of the mountain beneath the wheels. Whatever waited in those woods would no longer be a mystery for long. The cabin was not just a structure lost in the wilderness. It was a path Samuel had carved specifically for him, a final act of love disguised as a simple wooden house. And as the road twisted toward the unknown, Adam could not shake the feeling that the true inheritance had only begun to reveal itself. The higher the road climbed, the quieter the world around them became, as if every mile peeled away another layer of civilization. The car's tired engine rattled and hummed beneath the strain, but Adam didn't slow down. He watched the tall trees sway like ancient guardians, blocking out most of the sun and casting shifting shadows across the bending asphalt. Liam leaned his head against the window, his eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and exhaustion. He had grown up surrounded by gray walls, concrete sidewalks, and the constant noise of a city that never slept. To him, this new landscape felt like stepping into a storybook his mother used to read before bedtime, a world that was breathing and wild and free. When the road turned into a narrow dirt path, rocks crunching under the tires, Adam gripped the wheel a little tighter. Uncertainty curled deep in his stomach as he scanned the forest for a hint of what awaited them. He had only ever been to the cabin once as a child, too young to remember more than the smell of pine needles and the warmth of Samuel's laughter echoing in the trees. Time had blurred those memories into something almost imaginary. Now he was returning not as a happy boy, carefree of the world's burdens, but as a man who had already lost too much. The cabin emerged slowly behind a wall of overgrown bushes and moss-covered stones, like a weary creature trying to hide from the world. Its wooden planks, once polished and strong, now appeared faded and cracked from decades of snowstorms and mountain winds. The roof sagged slightly in the middle, and the front porch leaned forward as though it had long grown tired of holding itself upright. Dusty windows reflected only the shadows around them, giving the place an eerie, forgotten aura. Adam turned off the engine and for a moment simply stared at the structure. There was no laughter from greedy relatives now, no mocking voices suggesting he had inherited nothing. Here, in the embrace of the mountains, their words drifted into insignificance. He opened his door and stepped outside, the scent of sap and damp earth filling his lungs in a way that made his chest ache. Liam struggled with the stubborn seatbelt buckle for a moment before climbing out, clutching his favorite worn-out toy in his small hand. His gaze darted around with wonder. He took a cautious step forward, then another, as if testing whether the ground here was safe to trust. The silence that surrounded them was different from the heavy silence of their small apartment. There, silence meant loneliness and fear. Here it was full of life, birds calling from the treetops, leaves rustling high above, and distant echoes of unseen animals living their secret lives. Liam breathed in deeply and looked up at his father with a faint smile. It wasn't large or energetic, but for Adam it was enough to ignite a tiny flame of hope. With a deep exhale, Adam approached the porch and tested the first wooden step. It creaked but held firm beneath his weight. He inserted the old brass key into the lock and turned it until the door gave way with a groan. Inside, the air smelled of aged timber, dust, and a little bit of sweet cedar that clung to the walls like a memory of Samuel himself. Light filtered dimly through the dirty windows, revealing a space frozen in time. An old stone fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel scattered with empty picture frames that once surely held family photographs. A small round table stood crookedly near the kitchen doorway, surrounded by mismatched chairs that appeared ready to collapse at a touch. Cobwebs stretched between ceiling beams, and the floors held the scars of generations of footsteps. Yet despite the neglect, there was a sense of familiarity in the layout, the sense that someone who loved this cabin had once tended to every corner, with purpose and pride. Adam walked slowly, his hand brushing over the peeling wallpaper and worn wooden furniture. He wondered when Samuel had last stood here. Had he looked around like Adam was doing now, thinking of the boy he'd leave this place to someday? Liam explored the living room carefully, avoiding dust piles and pointing occasionally at objects he couldn't quite name. Every discovery, no matter how mundane, lit up his pale face with curiosity. A large carpet lay at the center of the room, an oval of muted red and brown threads, frayed around the edges from years of footsteps dragging over it. Something about it didn't fit. Amid all the dust and neglect, the carpet looked almost too neatly placed, too intentional. Adam felt a quiet tug of instinct and paused. He knelt down, pressing his fingers against the edge of the fabric. The carpet felt heavier than it should, as though its purpose wasn't just decoration. He lifted it slowly, revealing wood beneath that seemed only slightly different in color, maybe from less exposure to light, or maybe from something more. Liam approached cautiously, curiosity shining through his hesitation. Adam found a round metal ring embedded flush with the wooden floor, almost invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. His pulse quickened. This wasn't an ordinary feature of an old mountain cabin. Samuel had been many things: clever, resourceful, and private. The ring suggested secrecy, and secrecy suggested purpose. Adam swallowed hard before slipping his fingers into the ring and lifting. A low groaning noise echoed as a concealed door, disguised as part of the floor, lifted upward. Their breath caught in their throats as a dark square opened beneath them, exhaling a stale draft of cold air. A narrow wooden staircase descended into shadows deeper than anything daylight could reach. There were no voices here, no whispers from the past. Only silence so pure it hummed in their ears. Liam stepped closer, gripping Adam's arm, his eyes wide. Adam placed a reassuring hand over his son's and forced himself to remain steady. Fear nipped at the back of his mind. Fear of rodents, structural damage, or something far worse. But along with fear came a strange excitement, a sense of uncovering what Samuel had wanted him to find. He picked up a rusty lantern resting near the fireplace, surprised when a turn of the knob caused a faint flicker of light to spark inside. Perhaps Samuel had used this very lantern. Perhaps he had known someone would need it after him. Each step downward creaked under Adam's weight, and dust drifted into the beam of faint light as though waking from decades of stillness. The staircase eventually opened into a wide underground room that none of the family would ever imagine existed beneath the simple cabin. Adam stood still as his eyes adjusted. The room looked almost untouched by time. The walls were lined with wooden shelves and secure metal lockers. Several large crates stood stacked neatly against another wall, labeled in Samuel's handwriting. There was a sturdy workbench covered with a fine layer of dust, but otherwise meticulously organized tools, arranged as though the old man had simply stepped away for a moment and intended to return. Adam's heart pounded as realization began to sink in. Samuel had built this place in secret. He had hidden it away from everyone, except, it seemed, his grandson. Liam clung to Adam's coat, staring at the countless objects around them. They were surrounded by a lifetime of someone else's determination and careful planning. Adam walked deeper into the room, feeling the weight of decades pressing down from the earth above. He didn't know what he was supposed to find here, but he knew without question that his grandfather had left this for him. Not the greedy relatives who now bathed in money they hadn't earned. Not the people who judged him and laughed in his face. This hidden space, whatever it contained, was entrusted to him alone. He saw a stack of old leather-bound journals tied with rope. The ink on the covers had faded, but the names and dates remained legible. Samuel had documented something carefully, something he wanted preserved. Next to the journals stood a set of metal cases secured with latches. The lantern light glinted against them, revealing small engraved symbols. Adam's breath caught. He recognized the shapes immediately. Coins, rare ones. The kind Samuel used to collect obsessively, yet never spoke of to anyone but Adam. The truth slowly dawned on him, like sunlight breaking through a storm. Samuel had known the rest of the family would sell everything he ever valued just to fill their pockets. But Adam wasn't like them. Samuel trusted him. Samuel believed in him. The old man must have spent years organizing and protecting these treasures, all for the moment when Adam would discover them. The realization sent a shiver through his body. His grandfather's love hadn't ended with his death. It was guiding Adam even now. He imagined what this room meant. Stability, security, a future where Liam could grow without fear of medical bills crushing their lives. A future where Adam could finally breathe without counting his pennies or worrying whether tomorrow would be the day everything fell apart again. But alongside hope came something deeper, something more emotional. This wasn't just wealth. These were Samuel's memories, his passion, his legacy, and it had been given only to Adam. Liam tugged at his sleeve, pointing silently at one of the cases. Adam crouched down and lifted his son into his arms, holding him close as they looked around together. There were no words needed in that moment. The silence here wasn't frightening anymore. It felt like Samuel was still with them, like he was watching over his grandson and great-grandson with quiet pride. The hidden room breathed purpose into the dusty cabin above, transforming a fragile shack into the doorway to their new life. Adam didn't rush to open anything. He wanted to absorb the meaning of the space before exploring further. He looked around at the shelves, the crates, the journal pages waiting to be read, the secrets patiently preserved. It was overwhelming, yet grounding. Perhaps his grandfather had always known that Adam would come here only when he needed it most, when the road forward seemed lost and hope was hanging by a thread. He turned slowly, taking in every inch of Samuel's hidden sanctuary. The lantern's glow cast a warm circle of light, enough to guide him through this discovery at his own pace. For the first time in years, Adam felt something strong and undeniable within him. Not fear, not desperation, but the sturdiness of a man who finally saw a chance to survive and protect the one person who mattered most. He tightened his arm around Liam, feeling the boy's heartbeat against his chest. They climbed back upstairs, emerging into the cabin's dim living room. Adam lowered the trapdoor and pulled the carpet back into place. The secret remained safe for now, hidden once more from the world. The house felt entirely different now, less like a burden, more like a promise. In that moment, Adam truly understood why Samuel had left him the cabin while the rest received money and property. The old man had given everyone exactly what they deserved. They got wealth that would disappear as quickly as their affection. But Adam received something far greater, a future built on trust, love, and the unspoken bond between a grandfather and grandson who had always stood together against the selfishness of others. As night fell quietly over the mountains and the first stars pierced the dark sky, Adam tucked Liam into a small bed they had dusted off earlier. He sat beside his son, watching him drift into sleep with a calmness he hadn't seen in years. The forest whispered outside, and the cabin creaked in a slow, soothing rhythm, like a lullaby only the woods could sing. Tomorrow he would return to the hidden room. Tomorrow he would begin reading the journals, opening the cases and discovering just how much Samuel had prepared for him. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of peace. He gazed into the quiet room and felt tears prick the corners of his eyes, not of fear or sorrow, but of gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered into the stillness, not needing to say more. And whether it was imagination or fate, Adam felt the faintest warmth curl inside his chest, like the echo of his grandfather's hand resting gently on his shoulder. The cabin may have looked like a forgotten relic to everyone else, but to Adam and Liam, it had become the beginning of everything they had been waiting for. The morning sunlight crept slowly across the wooden floor, illuminating dust particles that swirled lazily through the quiet cabin. Adam opened his eyes before the sun had fully risen, his mind already awake and pulled toward the hidden room beneath their feet. For the first time in a long while, he felt anticipation instead of dread when thinking about the day ahead. Sleep had not erased his disbelief at what he had discovered the night before. He lay still for a moment, letting the realization settle further into his bones. His grandfather had chosen him for a reason, and that reason was buried just below the living room, waiting for him to step inside and understand it fully. Liam slept peacefully, wrapped snugly in blankets that smelled faintly of cedar. His cheeks had more color than usual, and his breathing seemed steadier in the crisp mountain air. Adam watched him for a few seconds, marveling silently at the difference one day could make, not just in their surroundings, but in the invisible threads of hope now stitched into their lives. Carefully, so as not to disturb his son, he pulled on a sweater and thick socks, then made his way toward the center of the living room, where the old carpet lay. His pulse quickened as he lifted the edge of the rug once again, exposing the wooden trapdoor. It no longer felt frightening. It felt like opening a door to the past and the future at the same time. When he pulled the door up and the cold breath of the underground space rushed into the room, he felt a flicker of his grandfather's presence, something warm and encouraging beneath the chill. He grabbed the lantern and descended the steps, each footfall echoing the steady beat of excitement in his chest. The underground room welcomed him as if it had been waiting. Everything looked exactly as it had the night before, neat and still as though preserved by time. Adam approached the workbench and the shelves more closely now, studying every detail with a mixture of curiosity and awe. There were items he recognized and many he did not. A magnifying lens lay beside stacks of small velvet pouches. Several notebooks were arranged in a row, their covers cracked at the edges, but still sturdy. Adam untied the rope that bound the journals and opened the one on top, revealing Samuel's elegant handwriting filling the yellowed pages. The entries dated back decades. Samuel had documented where each coin had come from, the history behind every piece, and even personal reflections about what they meant to him. Some stories told of long journeys to distant places where he bargained with collectors and historians. Others described how he had stumbled onto rare findings purely by chance, guided by instinct and passion. And occasionally he wrote about Adam, about how he saw in his grandson a heart that valued things not for their price, but for the love and story they carried. Adam's eyes blurred as emotions swelled in his throat. He could almost hear Samuel's voice reading the words aloud, a voice filled with warmth and pride. His hands trembled slightly when he set the journal down and moved toward the metal cases. The lantern's glow shimmered across the polished edges, revealing fingerprints left long ago. When he opened the first case, the sight before him stole his breath. Rows upon rows of rare coins gleamed from their velvet beds, gold, silver, metals he didn't even recognize, each one perfectly preserved. Some were ancient, engraved with symbols from lost civilizations. Others were commemorative pieces from historical moments. Every coin held a lifetime of dedication, a secret Samuel had kept hidden from the world. Adam lifted one carefully, holding it between his fingers with reverence. It felt heavier than expected, as though the entire history it carried was condensed into its small form. The realization of what this collection represented settled slowly and heavily upon him. This was wealth beyond the comprehension of those foolish relatives who had laughed at him. This was security, freedom from the crushing tide of hospital bills, the possibility of a life where he could focus not on surviving, but on living. His son would have the chance to grow up, to be healthy, to chase dreams that once seemed forever out of reach. But more than that, this was love, Samuel's love. Every carefully gathered piece was proof of who mattered to him in the end. Adam felt tears gather in his eyes again, not from desperation this time, but from something tender and fiercely protective. He would not sell these treasures merely to indulge in luxuries. He would honor his grandfather's legacy by using it to secure a better future for Liam, and by keeping the collection intact whenever possible. It was the last piece of Samuel left in the world, a reflection of his spirit in his life's passion. As Adam continued exploring, he uncovered documents that confirmed the authenticity and appraised value of the entire collection. He found handwritten notes instructing him on how to maintain the coins and where to take them if he ever needed to exchange a few for money. Samuel had thought of everything. It was as if he had been planning this gift for years, slowly crafting a safety net for the person he loved most. A small wooden box near the back of a shelf caught Adam's attention. He opened it gently and discovered several photographs, some of him as a child on Samuel's knee, others of the cabin being built in its earliest days. A younger Samuel stood proudly with construction tools in hand, his eyes bright with determination. On the back of one photograph were written the words, "For Adam, so he will never forget where strength begins." Adam pressed the picture to his chest, overwhelmed by a longing to thank the man who had given him more than he ever dared to imagine. The silence of the underground room felt warm now, no longer a place of mystery, but a sanctuary of memory. Adam traced his hand across the metal cases one last time before gently closing them. He turned to the journals and gathered them carefully into his arms, knowing he would spend many nights reading through each page, learning the pieces of Samuel's heart that he had never known before. When he climbed the stairs and returned to the living room, he placed the journals on the table with the care one might show to fragile treasures. As he looked around the cabin again, everything felt different. The walls, once dull and tired, now held purpose. The cracks seemed like veins where the spirit of Samuel ran through, holding everything upright. Even the old furniture seemed to hum with life and gratefulness that someone finally understood its worth. Liam shuffled into the room, rubbing his eyes and dragging his toy along the floor. Adam smiled warmly and lifted his son into his arms. He didn't share details just yet, but he promised himself that one day Liam would know the entire story, how his great-grandfather had saved them both in ways that money alone could never explain. He kissed the top of the boy's head and thanked the universe for giving him this moment. That afternoon, Adam prepared a small fire in the cabin's fireplace. The crackling wood filled the room with a comfort he had forgotten existed. While Liam played nearby, Adam opened the first journal and began reading more about Samuel's life. He learned things he had never known, the sacrifices the old man had made, the dreams he had abandoned when responsibilities grew heavy, and the hope he had carried for his grandson even when the rest of the family turned cold. As the hours passed, the sun dipped behind the mountains, and the forest grew darker. Shadows gathered outside the windows, but Adam no longer felt afraid. This home, hidden from the world and buried beneath years of dust and secrets, had become a fortress of love and resilience. He stoked the fire again and continued reading until the words on the page began to blur. Finally, he closed the book and looked down at Liam, who had fallen asleep beside the hearth. Adam gently lifted him and carried him back to the bed, covering him with soft blankets. He brushed a thumb over his son's cheek and whispered silently how much he loved him. When he stepped back into the living room, he stood for a long time, staring at the rug that concealed their legacy. A ripple of determination spread through him. He knew what he needed to do next. He would protect the collection. He would honor Samuel's trust. He would build a future that his son deserved. And if the world tried to take it from them, he would fight with every ounce of strength he possessed. Adam turned off the lantern and let the crackling fire cast its warm glow across the room. He no longer felt alone. The weight of responsibility was still heavy, but now it was accompanied by pride, love, and a sense of destiny. The cabin had become the answer to prayers whispered in desperation over the years. Tomorrow, the true transformation of their lives would begin. And as Adam drifted off to sleep that night, he dreamed not of fear or loss, but of a bright and open future, one that Samuel had believed in long before Adam ever dared to. The weeks that followed became a quiet transformation, almost invisible from the outside but monumental in the hearts of the two people living within the walls of the mountain cabin. The discovery beneath the floorboards changed everything, turning what others mocked as a worthless shack into the foundation of a new and hopeful chapter in Adam and Liam's lives. Each morning began with the scent of pine drifting through the windows and the sound of birds greeting the sunrise. Liam's cheeks grew rosier, and his laughter, something that had become so rare in the city, returned like music Adam feared he might never hear again. The crisp mountain air seemed to breathe life back into his son, easing his symptoms more than any expensive medicine had ever managed. Adam divided his days between taking care of Liam, studying the journals Samuel had left behind, and planning a future that had once felt impossible to reach. The collection would ensure that Liam could finally receive the proper medical care he needed. It would guarantee that they never again had to choose between food and medicine, between electricity bills and survival. For the first time, Adam could imagine a life where he wasn't constantly looking over his shoulder for the next hardship. He could imagine a home filled with warmth instead of dread. He could imagine Liam growing up strong, safe, and filled with dreams rather than limitations. Yet Adam did not rush to spend or sell the coins. He approached everything with careful thought. He contacted experts discreetly, people recommended in Samuel's notes, trustworthy appraisers who had once worked closely with his grandfather. One by one, Adam transported a few select coins in sealed envelopes to be evaluated and documented legally in his name. Each piece confirmed what Samuel's meticulous notes had already promised. The value was enormous, far beyond anything the family had assumed Samuel had left behind. The cabin, once dismissed as a worthless joke, had become the crown jewel of the inheritance. The news of his newfound stability did not remain a secret for long. At first, Adam received a few casual messages from relatives, pretending concern, asking how he was adjusting to life out there in the woods. But when no answer came, their curiosity grew hotter and sharper. Eventually, someone learned the truth. It spread through the family like wildfire. Fueled by greed and disbelief, they had mocked him to his face, and now they regretted every insult they had thrown his way. Samuel's children, his sister, the cousins who had once sneered at his misfortune, they now called relentlessly, demanding explanations, insisting they deserved to know what their father had been hiding. Adam let the phone ring without answering. For years, these same people had stood by silently as he fought alone to save his son. They hadn't offered help or comfort or even a kind word. Now they wanted access to the treasure Samuel had intentionally kept from them. The anger Adam felt did not come from spite, but from the fierce instinct to protect what his grandfather had trusted him with. He built a wall inside himself and refused to let their voices pass. Not anymore. Their opinion of him no longer mattered. He knew his worth now. Samuel had always known it too. Liam's health steadily improved, and with expert guidance, Adam began the process of moving them from the mountains to a more practical location, one closer to hospitals and schools, yet still quiet and safe. The cabin would always remain their sanctuary, a place tied to Samuel's legacy, but Liam's long-term care required access to the world beyond the woods. With the money from a single coin only, one Adam paid off every debt he had ever accumulated. With another, he bought a modest but comfortable house near a reputable medical center. He enrolled Liam in programs designed to support his treatment and education. He watched with pride as Liam made new friends, as he ran a little faster, laughed a little louder, and lived a life that once seemed unreachable. The doctors were amazed by his progress. They spoke of long-term improvement, of stability and health that were now within his grasp. Adam had grown used to fear shadowing every moment of parenthood, so learning to live without that constant dread was a new and delicate feeling. Some nights he would watch Liam sleeping peacefully in a bed surrounded by toys and books, in a room full of light and warmth, and tears would silently fall from his eyes. They were tears of relief, of gratitude to a man who was gone, yet still protecting them. Despite their new life, Adam returned to the cabin whenever he needed strength. He and Liam would drive up the winding mountain road on weekends, bringing fresh flowers to place by the fireplace as a tribute to Samuel. The cabin was no longer abandoned or decaying. Adam worked on repairs slowly but lovingly. He replaced broken boards on the porch, repaired the roof's sagging beams, and scrubbed away years of dust. The place began to glow with the same spirit Samuel must have seen when he built it long ago. When relatives eventually showed up at the new house demanding their share, Adam did not falter. Their polished shoes and expensive coats looked ridiculous on his doorstep, their voices drenched in entitlement rather than remorse. They argued that family should share everything, that they too were a part of Samuel's legacy. Adam calmly stood before them, the strength in his voice surprising even him. He explained that Samuel had made his intentions unmistakably clear. The cabin and everything beneath it belonged to him and Liam alone. Their anger erupted instantly. Threats, accusations, tears of false betrayal, all of it spilled out in a desperate attempt to claw back what they had thrown away. Adam stayed firm. These people had never cared about Samuel's passions or his memory. They cared only about wealth, and Samuel had known that all along. Once the shouting faded and the relatives left in frustration, Adam closed the door and leaned against it. There was no triumph in the moment, no desire to hurt them as they had once hurt him. Instead, he felt only peace. Samuel had chosen correctly, and Adam was finally honoring the trust placed in him. Years passed. Liam grew taller and stronger. His illness remained a part of him, but it no longer controlled his life. He became curious about the world and eager to explore it. On his 10th birthday, Adam presented him with one of the journals. Together, they began reading Samuel's stories. Liam learned who his great-grandfather truly was, a man who believed in legacy, in love, and in giving his heart to those who deserved it. One bright spring morning, Adam and Liam returned to the cabin for the first time in months. The flowers around the clearing had bloomed wildly, covering the grass with colors that looked almost unreal in their beauty. They stepped inside the familiar space and found it unchanged, still humming with quiet memory. Adam opened the trapdoor and let Liam look down into the hidden room. The boy stared in awe, clutching his father's hand tightly. Adam smiled softly and told him that this treasure was not meant for the world to steal or admire. It was meant to keep them safe, to remind them where they came from, and to teach them what truly mattered. Liam nodded solemnly, understanding far more than a child his age should need to understand. He hugged his father tightly, and Adam closed his eyes as a wave of emotion swept over him. Every sacrifice, every tear, every night spent praying for a miracle, it had been worth it. They walked outside together, standing on the porch that now looked sturdy and whole. The wind rustled through the pines and the sky above seemed endlessly blue. Adam lifted his face to the sunshine and breathed deeply, letting the warmth seep into every part of his soul. He thought of Samuel, of his steady hands, his wise eyes, and his unwavering belief that love had the power to change the world. "Thank you," Adam whispered once more, his voice steady and full of quiet reverence. He felt no need to speak louder. The mountains heard him. The trees heard him. Most importantly, he believed that Samuel heard him. Adam wrapped his arm around Liam's shoulders as they stepped down from the porch, leaving the cabin softly behind them. They no longer feared the future. They walked into it with heads held high, guided by the strength and generosity of a man who had given them everything when they had nothing. The cabin remained standing in the clearing, the trapdoor hidden beneath the rug, the journals safe upstairs, the coins resting quietly below, undisturbed and treasured. It would always be there, a symbol of where hope is born and where family proves its worth. And so the legacy continued, protected not by locks or walls, but by love. If you enjoyed this story and want to see what happens next in our upcoming videos, make sure to subscribe right now. Don't leave without smashing that like button and sharing this video with your friends. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Your support helps us bring more unbelievable true life stories to the channel. Stay tuned. The best is yet to come.